I've always been a great believer in that philosophy that says if you want to understand anything in life, look to the origin. So when I was pondering on why I've had this lifelong obsession with brands and branding and how they work, I did in fact look at the origin of where the word comes from. And it might surprise you, unless you're an old Norse speaker, that the word brand is actually this one. I'm not quite sure how it's pronounced, brandra, but it means burnt. And therein, lies so much of the confusion as to why people get lost in what exactly a brand is. The burning on the side of a cattle is what commonly is thought of as brands, and that's because it comes from this word and this meaning. People like me and others have bent the meaning over years to become something much more complex. And there are inevitably lots of schools of thoughts about how to define a brand. So let's take the classic, I think somewhat old-fashioned and accounting-based one that was sort of given rise to in the 50s in America, whereby they said a brand is the value of a business, beyond the worth of its tangible assets. So tangible assets being one thing, anything beyond that is really the value of your brand. It's called in city terms goodwill, but actually in this day and age, service-based economy, digital economy, not terribly helpful given that few of us have got many tangible assets from which to start, and there are a number of very large brands with not many tangible assets. So I'm not sure it's helpful or relevant for today. So we come from that. Let's say that was written by the accountants, and we'll go to another one which was written by the advertising people. Now, I'm going to get myself into deep trouble by pronouncing this one, which is product plus personality equals brand, by pronouncing this one as not just shallow, but deeply shallow. And of course it suits the advertising universe, who deal largely in products that their job in life is to add personality, and those are the constituent ingredients to make a brand. At one level I can see that. For my money it's nothing like as profound enough. There's another very popular one which is very good and I think unarguable with, and just as natty, promises delivered. So if you as a business or product service extend a promise to a customer base and deliver against that and do the same again and again and again and again, what happens is you build trust, and as a result of having built trust, you become the go-to guy that they cross the street for more than the one next door to. And so at its heart of branding is promises delivered. Very nice. I wish I'd invented it, and it works very well. However, inevitably, it's still a over-simplistic view of the world, the branding world. I take a slightly different view, and that's to say, the basic assertion is this: all businesses are fundamentally predicated on being made up of three parts. One is their culture. Who you are, who you hire, how you're structured, what you celebrate, what you frown on. Culture. The second part is your product or your service, because that's the bit that people out there see. And the third part is your reputation, which in this digital and highly connected world, this is about how you manage your communications. And my starting point with having understood these three parts of any business is to try and draw them together into a new shape which looks like this, a Venn diagram, where there we have our culture, there we have our products and services, there we have our reputation, where the magic starts to happen where these parts collide and cross over. And this bit is the glue or the joystick that, in my view, runs companies. I call it the single organizing principle. And the language for this is important. because first and foremost, it must come from the principles of the organisation. This is not about a makeover. This is about getting to the fundamental truth, the guts of the organisation, articulating and realising what the principles are by which we adhere, and then adhering to them. So that's the first step. The second step is if the advertising business taught me one thing, it was the value and power of single-minded thinking. If the advertising industry taught me one thing, it was the power of laser-like, single-minded thinking. I've never encountered a business yet that doesn't have a proposition. I encounter businesses all the time that have many propositions, and therein lies their problem. They haven't as yet had the courage to decide which one is the one that they're going to get behind and let everything else subside behind it. That's terribly important. And the third part, why it's an organising principle, is that it's intended as a piece of intellectual property to empower and enable all the staff in a business to operate with freedom but within a framework. So the framework is clearly established, and everyone understands what they're trying to do, and because of that they're empowered to make decisions that support that end purpose. Over time, what we're trying to do is find a state of nirvana whereby this piece of intellectual property starts to become the governing thought inside the organisation. Great examples of this are BMW, for example, whose culture directly produces the product and the services and creates their reputation. You can't split the difference between any of those three parts. And their thinking, which in fact is made up of 4 values, governs everything they do inside the organisation. Everyone's very clear about it. Equally, in a B2B situation, a brand like Goldman Sachs have a very distinct culture, have very distinct products and services that mirror that culture, and in turn create a commensurate reputation with that. Again, completely aligned, seamless connections between these 3 parts. This state, though, is the state that everyone's marching towards and takes years to get to. Many try, few actually get there. There are examples in most sectors of the one outstanding brand that is in this state, where you look back to the connections between their culture, their product and their reputation, and you start to understand why it is that they are the standout brand in their marketplace. It's an interesting exercise actually to analyse this chronologically and try and work out where you are on this stage. Are you here where you have potential for misalignment between these parts, or are you here where you have a central notion and a focus and a proposition, but you haven't completely drawn all the other parts of the business around it? Or indeed are you here, in which case you're flying through the air financially much more aerodynamically efficiently in this shape, because you're clearly not carrying drag by having misalignment going on at the top. A misalignment between these 3 parts means wastage of pounds or euros or whatever currency it is that you're wasting money in, because you've got tension between a culture that's pulling left and a reputation that's pulling right, or products that are trying to go up and a culture that's trying to go down. And any form of misalignment across those 3 is inefficiencies and wastage. So it leads me to a small mathematical formula that helps put this in the context of financial worth for businesses, rather than it just be a piece of branding theory, that says if fundamentally this is all about alignment, there is A, that's going to allow you greater efficiencies, because you have no tension across these 3 parts, therefore there's much less wastage. With greater efficiencies, it allows you much greater profitability. And if that piece of logic is true, that by being well aligned you're likely to be more profitable, if that's true, then ongoing alignment, which is this wonderful state of nirvana, ongoing alignment is going to give you sustainable profitability, which is, of course, one of the key determinants of shareholder value. So all of a sudden, brand that up here was about burning a mark in the side of a cattle has become something that delivers direct value to a business if it's thought of in these terms, considering these three aspects of the business, putting them together into one single organising principle, expressing and articulating that principle in a meaningful and motivating way for your audience, and in turn then driving that through the business in a consistent, applied fashion until you reduce wastage and increase alignment to get you to this profitability. Here endeth the lesson.